Welcome to this week's Desk Side Chat. Our guest for this week is Alanah Phillips. Alanah, appreciate you joining us this week.
Happy to be here this morning.
The conversation topic for this week is choosing the right affiliation option for you. And Alanah, I think you're going to be able to offer a lot of great expertise and insight on this topic. You are director of recruiting for Lincoln in the West region. You're running your own podcast, Next Gen in 10. And then you have this really interesting concept, which I'd like for you to talk about, break up with your broker dealer. I think there's a lot of really great insight that you've been sharing. And again, really excited to have you as our guest this week.
Sounds like it'll be a fun conversation, John. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you and I have talked a few times about recruiting, or about a lot of different areas in this industry, but recruiting in particular. And, you know, it's almost like recruiters just have a worse name than advisors. I mean, one of the things that got me going in the beginning was just the negative perception from the general public of advisors, but recruiters almost to another level experience that in our industry. So how are you trying to, I guess, kind of change that perception and differentiate yourself among your peers, Alanah?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been doing this particular role for 3 years now, recruiting experienced folks. I started off recruiting inexperienced people, bringing them into the industry, training, getting them licensed, all that good stuff. And that doesn't have such of a bad rep, which is great. But the experienced recruiters in the industry, I didn't want to be one. Like the opportunity presented itself, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of that group. It's shady. There's a lot of that you overpromise and underdeliver and say things that aren't true to get a deal done. And there's a lot of nastiness like that. And I don't think that is true of the majority of recruiters in the industry, but there are certainly some that have changed that reputation and perception. So
squeaky wheel gets the cheese. So the ones who
yeah.
are doing that are the ones that make the noise.
Yeah, those are the ones that we hear about. And those are the ones that obviously there's bad experiences that advisors share. And we know advisors talk and they like to tell their stories. So for me, it has always been, and I was like this in any role I've done previously, like I think that if we give people the information and the education, they're going to make the best decision for them. And they're going to appreciate that you were a trusted resource, provided value. And a lot of times they're going to make the decision maybe you would have wanted them to make if you have some sort of incentive that you're trying to recruit them somewhere and that's your job to do it. It worked for intern candidates. It has been the case with experienced folks. Like I think most of us just want to be told the truth. And if we have somebody that'll do that for us and say, this isn't the best situation for you, how do we get you out of that situation? If you're the person that helps them with that and you have a good solution, they're probably going to want to go with you anyway. So break up with your broker dealer is part of that process of eliminating some bias that exists within experienced recruiting.
So if I'm an advisor, and we can probably differentiate this at different points in a career, whether somebody's just starting out or experienced, what are the most important things for an advisor to consider when determining? There are so many different affiliation options, whether you want to be with an institution, whether you want to be independent, whether you want to be RA only. So what are the most important things for an advisor to consider, really at any point in their career?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, to be considering it, there's a lot of advisors that don't think about where they're at, if it's a good fit for them and for their clients. And that's like, it should be part of your due diligence naturally. If you are reviewing the investment options that you have your clients in, you should also be reviewing where it is that you're doing business. So that's the first piece, like at least you should be thinking about it. And then the other factors to consider, and John, I'll typically draw out for somebody this sort of spectrum of opportunities in the industry, and on one side, there's banks, credit unions, more captive sort of places, low risk, lower reward, low business development. Maybe you're an employee. As you move further along that spectrum, you get a little more independence, maybe insurance BDs, wirehouses, You're still not having to reinvent the wheel, or you don't have total creative control. And again, as you continue down further, independent BD, RIA space, you've got more creative independence, you've got more ownership, but you also have higher risk, higher reward, higher push for you having to be the person to do all the business development and put the pieces together. And so every person fits somewhere on that spectrum, depending on their risk tolerance, their business and personal goals, and how much control they want to have in what they do. And for everybody at any point in their career, that could be different. So I think most important factors comes down to the same process you might take a client through to figure out what the best investment option would be. Is we've got to look at your goals and your risk tolerance and your desire for control, and ask some questions about that. And then, when we get answers to those questions, John, right, if they're really good at business development, or they have high risk tolerance, they don't have a family to provide for, they like to have creative control and build things on their own, well, that might lean us more towards an indie BD or an RIA option. If they don't, and they don't want to think about work when they leave, and they don't want to have to go out and prospect and eat what they kill, well, we might lean towards something on the other side of the spectrum, on bank or wire south side, right? So it just depends on the person.
So what would you say differentiates your process, Alanah, in comparison to your peers in having these discussions with advisors?
That's a good question. I would love to say I am so different, but I'm sure there's, a lot of folks that are starting from this place of this is not for me beginning with a sale or beginning with a prescription. Like, we have to diagnose before we prescribe. So I always take it back, and especially the best advisors that I work with, they have a process. You bring in a client, you do an initial meeting and a data gather, and there's an understanding of the client's situation. I would work with an advisor in the same way, right? Talk to me about your business. Let's talk about those goals. Let's assess the risk tolerance. Let's understand your pain points, what you love and don't love. And then from there, you can start to make some recommendations. But I watch recruiters all the time, and I see it in LinkedIn messages, John, leading with payout, or they'll call me and I've got voicemails of recruiters from a couple of very large independent broker dealers that they lead with the payout, or they lead with the transition dollars. And that is wild to me. It's wild to me that it does still work sometimes, but that is a very normal practice in our industry.
Well, I mean, money does matter, right? I mean, it's,
Sure.
it obviously, in order to provide for your own family as an advisor, you need to earn a living. In order to provide the best service to your clients, you want to make sure that you're offering, services for a reasonable cost. So I guess, how do you get to the point where you're helping advisors actually ascertain, when you get to that point where that does become important to look at, maybe it's not first in your eyes, but it's certainly part of the equation.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously has to be part of the equation. You're not going to make a change if it's worse for you or worse for your clients or any of that. But I mean, I think it's the same thing. The reason that we're not slinging stocks anymore, right? You're not calling somebody and promising a rate of return or talking about a specific set of investments, right? There's a reason that a bond portfolio might be better for your client versus a stock portfolio. And both of them mean money to your client, but they also mean, lower risk, higher risk, whatever, higher reward. That we can't, starting there, I feel like we're starting with the wrong things. The money has to make sense. We know the money has to make sense. You're not going to make a move as an advisor and uproot your whole business and your life and the process that it takes. I mean, the process sucks, right? Just like moving houses. It's a mess. It's a messy process. It's a lot of work. It's high stress. So the money has to make sense, but it can't be the main thing, and it can't be the thing that we start with.
So what would be some of the bigger mistakes or challenges that you see advisors making, maybe in addition to just simply not being willing to at least explore their options? What are some of the biggest mistakes that advisors are making?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you kind of took my first comment. Like the first mistake is not looking, right? And sometimes you find you're happy where you're at. It's the right place. It matches your risk tolerance and your goals for right now. And that's a good thing. The other thing is there is a lot of money in these recruiting deals. I mean, it's crazy right now, the amount of money that firms are willing to pay for an advisor, pay third-party recruiters, pay that pay that third-party recruiter for recruiting somebody to their firm. I mean, I don't think advisors understand how much money is involved in that.
Can you talk a little bit about the bias on that? Because we've talked about that before on the third parties.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's bias for everybody in this process. I work for Lincoln. Obviously, I get paid to recruit for Lincoln. That's my day job. We all have some sort of bias of the firms that maybe we recruit for. And there is this perception that like third party recruiters have less bias, but they don't. I mean, they're getting paid by some of these firms as high as 12% of a recruit's trailing 12 revenue, and other firms it might be as low as 6%, right? So like, where do you think most of their recruits are going to go? The firm that pays 12% or the firm that pays 6%?
Third party recruiter in name only, because they end up being just an extension of a particular firm.
Yeah, right there. I mean, again, we're all, I think internally there's selfish motives, and we try to be conscious of those and not allow those to rule everything that we do. But if that's the perverse incentive structure that they're functioning under, where do you think they're going to place people? Or where do you think, which firm is definitely going to end up on that list of 3 that you give to every advisor that you work with? And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best firm for the advisor that they're working with.
There certainly is, again, in a lot of different areas in this industry, bias, hidden agendas. That's one of the big things that we're trying to do with this cause, is turn the lights on, operate in transparency. But as you talked about in the beginning, there's a lot of negativity around just the recruiting aspect, in particular, these promises, the bias, and so forth. And I think that's very insightful when you think about the third party recruiters, because as an advisor, on its face, it's like, oh, well, maybe this is somebody who's objective, who's just going to really get to know me and my business and is going to steer me to the right place. But that certainly may still be the case, but it may not be the case.
Yeah, no, completely. And I mean, we've talked about this before too. I think it's important that advisors understand, as much as all of us might treat them like the client in this process, they're not paying for this service, right? And so if you're not paying for a service, you are the product. And to recognize that, I think, is important. We, especially third party folks might tout like, oh, I've got contracts with X number of firms. It's like, well, those firms are the ones that are paying you still, though. So the advisor is still the product and not the client.
So when it comes to the clients, where do you see, so the end clients, right? Your clients are the advisors, but the end clients, where do you see the end clients fitting into this discussion and this in consideration for an advisor?
Yeah, you mean like how much should the advisor consider them in the move?
Yeah.
I mean, that probably should be number one. It's not, like, we can't pretend that it is number one. Advisors are going to start from all the things, and this is where breakup with your broker dealer comes in, all the signs that it's time for a breakup, right? And those typically, well, they might center around some things that affect their clients. They typically are signs that the advisor is experiencing first, right? So it's things like, and it's all the same reasons you break up with a person. Your firm doesn't celebrate you. Your firm controls your time. Your firm controls the money. They lie to you. They tell you nobody else will love you. All of those. I mean, these are things that firms say to advisors, and they are things that first affect the advisor and the advisor's team, right? But they also spill over into affecting the client, right? If your firm is controlling your time, that is time, and advisors that are in a channel where they have regular meetings during the week that their manager hosts or whatever, and they have to step away from their business for those meetings. It's affecting the advisor first. It's taking time away from them and their practice, but it's also affecting their clients, that they don't have that time in front of clients.
And it's such an important thing to think from a long-term perspective. And this is, I think one of the things that our industry has, it kind of gets backwards in many ways, is that, well, I own the clients, firm owns the client. Nobody owns the clients. Clients are going to go wherever they want to go. They're going to go find the best service they possibly can. But an advisor, whether you're captive or not, and I've said this a lot, you think with a business owner mindset. Even if you're in a captive situation, the clients should be, your clients ultimately, and they have you don't own them. They get to choose where they want to go. But if you're delivering that exceptional service and you need to make a move at some point down the road, clients should inevitably follow you. You mentioned last week when you and I caught up a little bit, a particular situation that you encountered recently. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Oh, was it the Morgan Stanley one?
Yeah. Well, we weren't going to say names, but that's all right.
Sorry, do we need to bleep that out?
That's fine.
A very large wirehouse that recently said that their advisors can only work from home for 90 days a year.
Which one is that? Yeah.
But yeah, the wirehouse controlling your time. Oh, wait, is that all of them? This advisor at Morgan Stanley, really nice guy. We had a great conversation. And this was one of those conversations, John, that I know if my counterparts heard this conversation, like the folks that do what I do in this industry, they'd be like, why did you talk to this guy for 40 minutes? Like, what a waste of your time. All I did was listen to his situation, and I gave him some advice, and we talked a little bit about independence in the BD world versus independence in the RIA world, because there's obviously some differences there. But I don't remember what question I asked, but he described himself as independent. And I was like, do you know what firm you're at? Like, if you leave, that firm will come after you because they think that your clients are their clients. Like, if we're going to define independence, like, ownership of clients would probably be at the top of that list. Like, if you leave, you can take your stuff with you. That's independence. Open architecture would probably be a part of independence. Autonomy and control of your business model, ability to brand and market how you would like to, ability to build a team how you would like to. And we can go through any number of firms and cross off one of those things. Like, that's not an independent situation then. But for him, because they'd been in another wirehouse that controlled their time more and controlled their money more, he felt, based on his current situation, what he needed for his clients, his personal and business risk tolerance, that they had all the things that they needed. He didn't have anybody that was telling him to do any specific type of business. He didn't have anybody that was controlling his time, controlling his money from his perspective, until he were to leave, right? Then he would feel that. So for him, that independence was happening under a situation that I would not deem independent, which is kind of interesting. So he did conclude that, there's not a delusion here that if they leave, the firm thinks these are their clients, but they're able to function under this little pseudo feeling of independence, which happens. That happens in different channels, right? If you have all the things you need and your clients are taken care of and you're taken care of, that feels like independence.
And really, each person is, I like how you describe your spectrum, right? It's like kind of like a client. You're looking at risk tolerance and so forth. It doesn't mean that there's just one way that's going to be best. It's going to depend, where you happen to fall on the spectrum, in your own mentality, your own way of doing business, but then also, ultimately where the clients stand as well.
I like you bring this up, and I think this is good because Kits has just posted this morning an article about everybody moving to the RIA space. And I just kind of roll my eyes a little bit because it's not untrue, right? When we look at investment news numbers from 2021, right? Advisor moves. The RIA channel and the independent BD channel had huge gains, and wirehouse and banks are way down, right? So we are seeing a shift But to think that, again, this would be like, we're going to put all of our clients into large cap stocks, like that's the solution for everybody. The RIA space is not the solution for everybody. There are lots of advisors that have gone that direction and realized they should not be the chief compliance officer. They don't want to be in control of all these little pieces of running a business, right? There are lots of folks that don't have that business owner mindset you mentioned, and they can still be good financial advisors. They can still be great at financial planning, and they shouldn't be in that channel. So I just thought, like, Kits has posted this and I'm like, we keep talking about how sexy and cool that RIA space, and it is, like, if you need the things that RIA space would provide to you as a business owner advisor. And if you don't, you still can be a great CFP, financial planner, financial advisor, whatever we call ourselves, in one of those other channels.
And as you talked about as well, right? It's not just all these channels. I mean, there's so many different options. There's this full spectrum. So one of the things that we are trying to do is really try to bring both sides of the spectrum together, the up and coming junior, younger advisors, the more senior advisors that are looking to potentially bring on a junior advisor partner. I don't want to take too much of the air here, but I want to share just a quick story. When I got into the business, and I've talked about this before, one of my first experiences, and I wanted to get into the business. I was bartending up in Park City, Utah, at a finance degree from the
Why
University
can
of
I totally
Oshkosh.
see you bartending? Like, wow.
That was my life. I wasn't a good bartender. I did magic behind the bar. That was how I made my tips. But I would always tease out that I had a finance degree and I wanted to get in the business. And I ended up getting a job without an interview. They hired me on the spot. But that was after making several attempts on my own to interview. And one of those, I went in and it just hits home in my head so much. And it's so much of kind of what we're trying to do is I took this test, and it was kind of a personality test, but also just trying to see what recommendations you would make. And they basically laid out this client scenario, and they said, basically the client couldn't afford, and the best option was option A, but we had to hit a quota in order to sell option B. And I'm like naive. I'm like, well, obviously, regardless of the quota, you just do A, you do what's best for the client, duh. So I checked that off, just thinking that's what they wanted. And then I bombed the test because they're like, nope, we only want people that are going to sell this stuff and not. So if I'm a young advisor or aspiring to be an advisor, and I'm looking to get into this business, there's traditionally been a way, only one way to get into the business, but there are all these different options. So what advice would you have for somebody who's looking to crack into this business? Because there are so many different options. What can they do to try and find the right home for them?
Yeah. I mean, first I would say go listen to Next Gen in 10. You can find that on Spotify. I host that. It's the American College that spurred this idea with our Next Gen task force. And we talk about this, right? This is one of those things, there's what is a paraplanner? What is a wholesaler? What is a practice manager? What is a CPA? Like there are so many different things in our industry that you can do. You don't have to be a financial advisor, one. And then two, we talk about some of the different models. We have a problem where there's a lot of folks that'll come into the handful, and like a small handful of firms that even bring new folks in anymore, very small handful. They'll come into large insurance BD where you have to sell to your friends and family, term life or whole life or whatever their product of choice is. And they work through their whole network, and now they have not been taught how to prospect, and they're done, and they didn't like it. And they didn't like being an insurance slinger, and they only have their 6 and 63. So they're limited in what they can sell. And then they don't go somewhere else because they don't realize that there are different opportunities in the industry, or that you could do something different. That happens all the time. So for the next gen folks, I think, unfortunately, there's not a place for them to go to get these answers, John. And that was part of why the podcast became a thing. I think we have a few of us in the industry that are willing to share our experiences, our advice with folks like that, and finding people that you can ask those questions of. What should I do next, right? What am I missing? I can't tell you that 6 and 63 thing, how many times I've had that conversation with a newer advisor in the industry. They have no idea that they can't do so much stuff that would be opened up by a 65 or a 66 or their 7. Folks that come in with a CFP, the book knowledge go into the RIA channel, and they have no idea how to prospect, or they have no idea how to create a client experience, but they do know how to do good planning, and they get stuck because they don't have the tools or the structure that they might have in a different channel to learn to prospect and build a business, right? So it happens on both sides there of just issues that nobody has shared with them, and they don't talk about it in the CFP program. They don't talk about it in their college, courses. It's all stuff like, I hope good people finish first, good advisors finish first at some point can help with new people in the industry staying here, because
we are helping with it because
Yeah.
of you, because of what you're doing. And I'll put a link to Next Gen Intent. I mean, you and others, right? The insight, like you said, there's a growing number of people that are willing to share and give back, that are very motivated, because like you described, there's, one of the big challenges that we've seen is that the industry has gotten a bad rap in general. And that was what kind of motivated me to launch out on this cause. But some of it is very legitimate, right? There are, issues and things out there, and it's almost, it's kind of, in some ways, there's a possibility for it to get worse, because you have these people that burn out and they end up leaving and never coming back. Like like how much talent have we lost as an industry over the years, of these people who have got in, like you're describing, and they're just kind of, they don't want to sling insurance. They don't want to just go sell their friends and family. Like, how many people but are good people? How many people have we lost as an industry over the last several years that could have ended up, really transforming this into a better and better industry?
Well, and this is the generation that posts everything, myself included, on our Instagrams and Facebooks and Twitter, and I don't even know TikTok anymore. But so they have that bad experience. We already have a PR problem as an industry, and then they tell their friends about it, or they've posted about it, or it's a thing on their LinkedIn or their resume. Somebody asks them, "Oh, hey, you were at X insurance broker dealer, you were at X RIA, what happened?" Right? You got these licenses, and they'll tell people it wasn't good. And then we lose out on all of that talent of their network of people, because they don't want to come hang out with us either.
So there's so many challenges in things on the younger, junior, up and coming, and again, but there's, I think, Next Gen Intent, and there's other resources that are starting to make that a little bit of an easier or better thoughtful process, or at least hopefully we can retain some of the good talent. But from your perspective, your experience, what advice would you have, Alanah, for advisors on the other end of that spectrum that might be looking to bring on this junior talent and find the right fit for their firms?
Can I give 2 shout outs to people that I think are doing a decent job at this?
Sure. This is open and transparent. You can do whatever
cool.
you want.
Dominique Henderson. I met Dominique Henderson. Somebody connected us. Super cool dude. Dom, thank you for everything you're doing. Dom works with career changers, right? So not necessarily folks coming out of college, but folks that had previous professional careers and experience. It's called Jumpstart Coaching Lab is his deal. And so folks that are career changers can come to him. He puts them through a program. He coaches them one-on-one. There's different levels, you can participate in, but he helps them figure out, where are you on this spectrum of opportunities in the industry based on your experience, based on what you want to do. And he's the only person I've ever run across who is solving this problem so specifically. And then new planner recruiting, Caleb Brown, I think Kitsis was involved in that at some point. They help with, especially I think in the RIA channel, placing, whether it's new CFPs or folks that have the education into, paraplanner, junior advisor type roles. And again, they're the only place I know of who is doing that specifically, not just that they're third-party recruiters and recruit everybody, but they're specifically looking for new planners to join up with existing teams. So those would be just 2 shout outs of folks that are actually doing this work. So your question was, how do we help teams experienced folks that need succession, get new folks in.
Or what advice would you have? And actually, I appreciate those shout outs because we can list them as resources. And again, we're looking to grow and maybe we bring them in and they can talk. So it sounds like they work with advisors, like some of these existing teams to help.
Yeah, Dom's only working, at least for right now, with the career changers. So he doesn't care about where they end up necessarily. He's helping them figure that out. And then the new planner recruiting is a third-party recruiter focused on, next gen new planners and placing them into teams.
Okay. So, and then, yeah, I guess back to it is, the advice you would have. So maybe those resources, or at least following them if I'm an existing advisor and just, keeping an eye on it. But what other advice would you have for a senior advisor who's looking to bring on a junior advisor?
Yeah, I hate to make some assumptions here because that kind of goes against everything that we're talking about. So I have a lot of questions first, right? Like, why do you want a next gen advisor? How do you envision them working on your team? I think getting clear on those things, because this can't be somebody that you bring in and don't spend time with, don't have a clear plan for, don't have a good, career path. I'm going to use loosely because, if this is a more entrepreneurial role, maybe the career path is more jungle Jimmy than laddery. But I think getting clear on that, why do you want this person? And then expectations, I think, are often mismatched. And for some reason, we don't want to talk about that. And it's the same thing. Like, again, we get into this relationship, break up with your broker dealer conversation. Like, if you get into a relationship with somebody and you don't talk about your expectations of each other, or you don't make sure that your values align, or, that you can deal with each other's schedule, or somebody snoring or messiness, you got to figure those things out if you're going to bring a new advisor onto your, let me pause here. Advisors who are listening to this, please don't ask your next gen advisors if they snore. That would be an inappropriate question to ask, but
we're going to go on a retreat this weekend. And I just want to make sure
metaphorically, if they snore, they do things that are annoying to you, because they probably will, right? Like, we're talking about very different generations, very different, places that they are in their life, very different ways that they understand the world. So I think getting clear on those expectations is important. And I guess my other piece of advice that I give often, so this may not always be the case, is just being willing to be flexible. I think that's the most important thing for this next generation of folks coming in. They don't want to make the 100 cold calls a day. They would rather be on LinkedIn or Instagram and doing marketing there. And I'll tell you, it works just as well. It probably works better than cold calling right now, right? They don't want to be in 9 to 5. Or I had a young advisor send me a thing the other day. I won't put this advisor on blast, but senior advisor, posted a thing about, come in with the coffee and go out with the garbage, right? Was the thing. So like, you're first in the office, you bring in the coffee. And then at the end of the day, when they're taking all the garbage out of the office, you go out in with the trash. And I was just like, what a terrible message that we're not trying to send. Like, why would anybody want to come to our industry if that's what they have to do to be successful? That it's about how much face time we saw you in the office versus how much work you did, or how many lives you impacted, or what new thing you created that day. Like, that's how the tech world works, right? Much more production driven, versus here we're coming in with a coffee and out with the garbage. Like, no, thank you. I have a life. I want to go do things. So I say all this to say, being flexible, I think, is an important piece of understanding there are different things that your next gen advisor will need, and it's not going to look the same as your put in your dues looked like.
And so many of these topics are overlapping and roll into each other. If you have time, I'd love for you to at least watch, and I can show you where in the segments in the videos, watch a few things from last week, because so much of this ties into the conversation. Last week was on mergers and acquisitions, and we kind of got into this subject a little bit, talking about these partnerships as being like a relationship, which I think
Yeah.
you would relate to. But I also think that it's important to really, you have a lot of advisors where a big part of their value proposition is that they've been there and done that. I was here in 87 and that's why I'm valuable to my clients. There's certainly something to be said for the value that comes with being there and experiencing these things, but that can't be the only thing. And also when you look at a lot of advisors, when we get books of business priced out and they look at the age of their clients, and that becomes a more and more important factor. They need to start getting younger and younger clients. Yes, you may not necessarily see eye to eye and be as comfortable with some of the dynamics and some of the outlooks that a younger person, a younger advisor might have, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, within a degree of reasonable expectations. I mean, you can't just show up in flip flops and whatever.
No,
I mean, there's going to be,
we're not talking about that.
there's going to be some things that you have to find a middle ground, but it is important to be open and it's at least challenge yourself. And that's a big thing that we're trying to do as well, is learn from everyone, follow no one. Is that, hey, it doesn't mean you have to, somebody shows up in flip flops, you can be open. I don't think that's going to work, but somebody shows up and says, yeah, LinkedIn is a better use of my time and sending DMs and following up on those. And it's a warm lead versus me going through a phone book. Right. I mean, or calling friends and family. Right. I mean,
yeah, better use of time. And also this, and just to get into LinkedIn as a prospecting tool, because there's so many firms that aren't open to this and so many teams that aren't open to this. It's not just LinkedIn, right? I mean, this works in other ways, other social media outlets, but for that to be a place where you spend your time, now we don't have to hire folks that are reliant on their personal network, which guess what? That means we can probably hire more diverse candidates who don't have wealthy family, parents, network, right? Because that's part of why historically we have had a lot of white men in our industry who come in, because we meet somebody who has wealthy parents, he's a young white man, and we believe that he's going to be able to leverage this network. I can't tell you how many times we interviewed folks for the intern program, and that was one of those things of the folks that would interview him that they would think about, does this person have a network? Right. And one of the kids that we hired, this is 6 years ago now, no network. His parents came over on a boat from Vietnam. They had absolutely nothing when they got here. His brothers had built some businesses, really entrepreneurial a spirit within his family. But he had no network. He was going to school in the Bay Area. His family was in San Diego, so he didn't know anybody there. And some folks didn't think that was going to work. And he was one of the most challenging people I've ever managed. But, we got him through the process of licensing, got him trained. He grew up a little bit because he was like 20, probably 20 when we hired him. And he's in his third year of being an advisor. So 3 years. His first year, he did a little over 100,000 in production. His second year, he did 240 or so. And this year he's on track to do over 300,000. So we can hire folks that will do well if they're given flexibility, if they're trained well, if they get into the right team situation. Like, this is a kid that somebody would not have hired because he did not have a network. He had no connection to anybody. He wasn't somebody's kid or friend or anything. And if we're willing to change the way we bring people in and allow them to prospect, that's what we can get. Like, how cool is that? Not only is his life totally different, he appeals to a different audience of people than you and I would, that he's able to help.
I'm gonna have a hard time, I'll rein it back in for now, but there's so many different things that I want to, get into. Is that this perpetuating cycle of the industry's got a bad rap, but we need to bring people in a certain way, and we end up losing good quality talent, as we talked about earlier. But then you bring up a really important point of right there of, how important it has been historically to have that network, and all that does is it just creates the same old. And so trying to break some of these cycles, and I, if you look on my whiteboard, we talked about this last week, what I wrote on this: complacent clients leads to complacent advisors, leads to complacent companies, a complacent industry. Is at some point this is going to break. the clients, this works right now, generally speaking, because compliance are generally complacent. It's pretty easy to just sit tight. They don't need to leave. But at some point, it will be easy, much easier for clients to leave. And so if you're not delivering genuine value, what's going to keep those clients there? It all comes down to that value. Like you're describing, I'm going to get a cup of coffee in the morning, or I'm going to be there from 7 to 7. Well, that's fine as long as you're delivering value and you're doing, not just showing up, you're actually doing something that the clients are going to see as valuable. It's so important for us, I think, to get ahead of this instead of just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah, I feel like we're a little behind there. It's funny you bring this up, and I'll give a shout out to somebody else who's doing a great job on LinkedIn. I don't know if Nic Nielsen is a part of this group.
I can't say. I'm not
Okay.
giving any.
Nic Nielsen's
Yeah.
super cool stuff that he's doing. He's not the only one. I just know he's had a lot of success on LinkedIn prospecting. He is a young advisor. And we did a thing with the American College where we talked about why it was important to have your next generation of recruited folks in, and having different folks on your team. And if you don't have a succession plan, like Nic, the Nics of the world are coming for your clients. Like, they can see him on LinkedIn. They can see the fun doodles that he draws. They can see that he appeals to them as the busy executive, or the couple in line after the soccer game at McDonald's, or whatever his profile is now. They see that and they would rather go work with Nic. And it's really easy. They can find him. It's easy to get a hold of him. It's clear what's important to him, his family, having a good time, taking care of his clients, being transparent, education, the whole thing. That, like, he's coming for their clients, Nic, and all these other advisors that have figured it out. So I think you're right. I think we are already behind this complacent cycle, and we're going to have to do a lot of work to get ahead of it.
Not to mention, and you brought his name up, so now I can talk about it. I didn't bring it up, but this mentality of abundance, one of our values, and actually Nic is a great representative of that mentality. At one point in the past, we did a topic on special needs planning, and Nic was one of the advisors sharing ideas back and forth, and just basically really genuinely basically just said, I would just like to be able to refer business to that other advisor, because that wasn't necessarily his area of expertise. Like, just having the mentality of, I don't need to be all things to all people. I have my niche. I have what I can do specifically. Other advisors have their niche. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, let's all get better together, share business, have this mentality of abundance. And again, so it's not just the value that Nic and others are delivering, but it's, I think, that mentality, that abundance mentality is at least starting to make a difference, in the industry, but we do have a long ways to go.
Yeah, I think that will take over, though. So I do agree. There has been, I mean, and this is when we look at the perverse incentives again of how the industry was built and compensation is structured, and advisors were measured. Like, I didn't know. I've been in the industry 6 years. I thought we were still like Wolf of Wall Street, and like people were like stabbing each other in the back to, sell whatever they were selling and beat the other person, which that is still happening. It's still happening in some channels. It's still happening in some programs where they bring new folks in. And when you start people that way, like, one, you attract people that have a scarcity mentality, right? Because if I have an abundance mentality, I do not want to participate in that group of people. That's why the reason I didn't want to be a recruiter. Recruiters have a scarcity mentality. Like, there's only 300,000 advisors, and I got to have them all. And I got to fit all of them into my, square whole model, even though they're a round peg. But if we have more folks that we bring in that see those of us that have an abundance mindset, that are willing to share information, that are willing to make connections without expecting something in return, like, I think we will overwhelm the folks that aren't like that. Like, they're at some point going to have to leave or join us.
Well, that's my line, is that it's inevitable. We're just accelerating the process. That's all this is. All right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this one-on-one portion. Anyone in the group who's watching on a live stream, feel free to jump in for the backstage pass portion. But Alanah, thank you so much for all the valuable insight, and thank you for what you're continuing to do, the breakup with your broker dealer, the next gen, all the, you have that right mindset. So again, there's a growing number of people, I think, that have that mindset that is starting to move things. Again, it's inevitable. We're going to get there. Just you're helping accelerate the process. So thank you.
Thanks, John.